And yet we're still being pushed to hustle, to give 110%, you know, only get that coffee for closers, only, be rewarded by your hard work. And God forbid you rest. Resting means laziness. But that hustle culture, it profits from our self-blame. So you might be thinking, oh, I'm just lacking motivation. I'm lacking discipline. But really, like your actual nervous system, your body is like, I'm lacking rest. I'm lacking resources. I am lacking sleep. I am lacking food, whatever. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the podcast. I am your host, Megan Winkler. And today we are talking about something that might get you a little riled up, but in a good way. We're talking about motivation versus capacity. And a few different elements are going to come into play here. We're going to talk about discipline and the work ethic. We're going to talk about the fluctuating resources around us and how the idea of like whether you're motivated or not, like how does that serve the patriarchy and capitalism? So buckle in, y'all. Let's do it. So before we really like dive into this, I do want to talk a little bit about the myth of discipline and how it's really gendered. So the idea of like kind of the Protestant work ethic, right? From the Calvinist roots that the Pilgrims carried over to what would eventually become the United States is this idea that like you have to work yourself to the bone in order to get anything out of this life. And really, this life doesn't matter all that much because it's all about where you go when you die. And whether or not you're getting into heaven. And the hard workers, who were pious and went to church at least once a week, sometimes more often than that, depending on the community they were in, they were the ones that got into heaven. And they were the ones who were doing the good job, the right job, right? So there's a lot of these elements in the idea of discipline and motivation. But unfortunately, we're not built like that. Like, and when I say we, I mean humans. Beyond gender, human beings are not built to be machines. We would be machines if we were supposed to be machines. And when we push ourselves past empty, because that happens a whole lot, we suddenly lose our motivation. We have no energy for it. We start feeling this shame around not being able to be disciplined or keep a schedule. It's the whole like 5 a.m. club. Well, you know what? Most of the people that I have ever heard talk about the 5 a.m. club are dudes. And yes, they have a lot of money. And maybe they didn't always have a lot of money, but I bet what they did have was a wife to take care of a bunch of stuff for them. So Mr. 5 a.m. club, getting up early, going and working out and having their breakfast and, all these things before, they start work at 8 a.m. and then they hit the ground running at their corporate job and blah, blah, blah. And men can do that. Like the biologically male body can do that on a pretty consistent basis. However, a biologically female body, and I'm not talking about gender, I'm talking about the actual sex of a person. The female sex goes through cycles. We go through 4 cycles a month. We call it like, I'm on my cycle or I'm on my period. Well, that's just 1/4 of the month. Our energy is not consistent, right? So we go through a follicular phase and we go through a menstrual phase and we go through a luteal phase. And then there's like all these little things in between. And no, I'm not a doctor, but I don't think you have to be a doctor to understand how your body moves and flows. And basically, like if you're in a female sexed body with, even if you don't have an active menstrual cycle, your body just knows those routines and it falls into those energy shifts. So, of course, like we went from being a society, like as human beings, where like if you ran a farm, everybody had their job, everybody was doing their stuff, to this idea in the modern world that everything having to do with the home was the woman's purview, right? Because like you might have like a farm run by a family and all the kids worked on the farm, of course. But you have a man out in the fields or with the cattle or whatever. And so he was working and doing that. And she was taking care of all the stuff inside. And then at the end of the day, they all get together. And I'm be willing to bet, like, if you had to wash the dishes out in like a wash basin outside, sometimes the husband did it, sometimes the wife did it, the kids did it a lot, whatever. But our society transformed, right? We went through a lot of technological shifts, the Industrial Revolution, all of this stuff, and necessity and also just free will made it so that women were working outside of the home, but there was still this societal idea that like a disciplined, good woman also took care of all the stuff in the home too. Right. So this has led to burnout looking different in women and those socialized as women than it does in men. And right now, like, we're all dealing with collective exhaustion and collective trauma, and none of this is a personal failing. Like, if you're trying to operate within a box that was set up for us in the 1950s, 1960s, or even a box that like worked a year ago but doesn't now, it's because the time has changed. And yet we're still being pushed to hustle, to give 110%, only get that coffee for closers, only, be rewarded by your hard work. And God forbid you rest. Resting means laziness. But that hustle culture, it profits from our self-blame. So you might be thinking, oh, I'm just lacking motivation. I'm lacking discipline. But really, like your actual nervous system, your body is like, I'm lacking rest. I'm lacking resources. I am lacking sleep. I am lacking food, whatever. We're also such fluctuating, flowing individuals, right? And this is across sexes and genders. We all actually have hormonal cycles. It's just more obvious in those of us who are of the female sex. We all have different nervous system states. We all have different seasons in life. Capacity isn't static. So when we talk about like, oh, I've just lost motivation, I want you to ask yourself, are you unmotivated or are you at capacity? And capacity is the amount of energy and resources you have to take care of yourself or help others or do your job or whatever. And when we hit this point where we're at capacity, we are full up or completely drained. We must then refill our energy resources. We must release some things, take some things off of our plate, and free up some space. This is not laziness. Laziness does not exist. Laziness goes all the way back to that Protestant work ethic and that idea that like you can trace the roots back to like the 1500s and shit. It goes back to that, laziness is the antithesis of godliness. And if you're lazy, then you're never going to get into heaven and blah, 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 blah. But depletion is very real. Depletion and needing to rest. These are very real things. And rest does not equal laziness. Laziness is bullshit. You, as of right now, have permission And I'm going to give it to you. You already had the permission, but in case you need to hear it out loud, you have permission to have high capacity weeks and low capacity weeks in the same month. You have permission to have high capacity days and low capacity days in the same week. Maybe you even have hours. I have my energetic container set up so that I'm doing my most creative work in the mornings and until about 2 p.m. because that's my high capacity period for the day. In the afternoon, things aren't firing like they were in the morning. And there's nothing wrong with that. As an example, my husband does really well at night. He gets his most creative and inventive thoughts out on paper after midnight. And to me, that sounds so exhausting, but that's what works for him. So when we allow for these shifts in our capacity, we're going to actually find that our motivation returns. Because if you're operating in that period of time, that period of energy, that energetic container, if you will, you are also operating in a point of time where you have the highest capacity. Okay. When you ignore capacity, it is serving the status quo, it is serving capitalism, it is serving the patriarchy. And burnout women don't organize, they don't resist, they don't demand better, they just kind of shut down. And right now is a time we need to make sure we are organizing, we are resisting, we are demanding better from our government, from our society, and from our fellow human beings. Okay. So I saw somebody post about this over the weekend. It's something that I have said for weeks and months is the burnout, the overwhelm, the hopelessness is the point. The administration is hoping we get burnt out of everything and we just tune it out. Okay. We cannot afford as a society to do that. And we cannot afford as individuals to just not be an active participant in our life. Right? But when we're burnout, when we're at capacity or over capacity, we just don't have the energy. So how can we shift things and design our life and our businesses around real energy? So we're really wanting to match our tasks to our energy states instead of forcing it the opposite direction. So that's where energetic containers come in, right? So you're looking at your calendar and you're figuring out like which days and times you operate better based on the tasks you need to do. We also need to really have a serious conversation about what a minimum viable product actually looks like, especially when you're running on fumes. Like, I am one of those people that sometimes good enough is just good enough. Quite honestly, I saw the best video several years ago. It was so funny. And it was this woman, she was just like, I can't believe you. Why would you serve your child frozen chicken nuggets? At least heat them in the microwave. Oh my God. That's just rude to give it to him frozen. And of course, it wasn't about them being frozen chicken nuggets. She was making a joke about the temperature, right? She's just like, yeah, microwavable chicken nuggets. Honestly, sometimes chicken nuggets, mac and cheese, or cereal for dinner, that is good enough. That is a minimum viable product on the evening. And move on with your life. Because sometimes something that's comforting, like a bowl of cereal for dinner, even as an adult, is exactly what you and your nervous system and your inner child need. Oh my God. I got a craving for Lucky Charms several months ago, and I had Lucky Charms like every day for breakfast, and it just nourished me and my inner child so much. And as I was looking back at that, as I was preparing for this episode, I realized that that was during a time where I was really stressed out. And it was really hard for me to make some basic decisions, but I needed to put food in my body in the morning. And is a bowl of Lucky Charms with milk the best option? It's better than starving. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear there's not enough protein, or it's not balanced enough, or it's a bunch of sugar, it's processed. Blech. It's better than operating on an empty stomach. So figure out what minimum viable looks like to you. And it doesn't have to look the same way it looks to me. In fact, I hope it doesn't. I hope it looks like what it means most to you. Also, building in buffers and recovery time and self-care time, whether that's making like a formal appointment with your massage therapist or getting mani-pedis with a friend, or it's just building in a lunchtime. I know a lot of business owners who actually block out their lunchtime. I did that in corporate world. I had lunchtime blocked out on my calendar. You could not schedule a meeting. And if you wanted to, so sad, you can go before or after. Preferably before, because that's when my brain is working better. But building those buffers into your calendar really help facilitate that capacity management we're talking about, right? And I want you to remember that rest and boundaries, they really are radical acts when the system wants you and needs you depleted. Again, the hopelessness, the burnout, it's the point. So rest and the boundaries are radical. They're revolutionary. They're badass. So here's one way to stop gaslighting yourself this week, because really, my friend, if you are talking about, oh, I'm not motivated, I don't have discipline, you're gaslighting yourself. Don't do that. So I've got 3 options for you. So one is to track your energy honestly for 3 days without judgment or trying to fix it. Okay. You're also going to notice when you're calling something a character flaw, when it's actually just a capacity issue. So if you're like, oh, I'm just not motivated enough, I'm not good enough at this, blah, 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 where's your capacity at? And finally, as Trudy barks in the background, who benefits from you believing that you're the problem? Who benefits? Who makes money off of that or gets advancement or anything like that? Who benefits from you believing that you are the problem, that you have a problem? My friends, thank you so much for tuning in. And Trudy says hi. If you have any questions or you want to learn more about working with me, head over to meganwinkler.com. And we also have a Patreon here. It's the Glow Up Circle, and that helps support the work that I do here on the podcast. And in exchange, you get brand new, actually, for February and moving on into the rest of the week. You get a weekly tarot card pull and a little mini astrology update to help you focus your energies for the week. That comes out at like 1 a.m. Central on Sundays. So you can actually do a little work with that on Sundays if you want. There's also, depending on the tier you're in, a lot of fun PDFs and other giveaways. Like I've done a little batch of affirmation cards before. We've got a really fun resource coming up this month. We're writing letters to ourselves. So a lot of really great benefits to joining the Patreon. That's the Glow Up Circle. I'll have that link in the show notes. And as always, you can find me on Instagram at It's Megan Winkler. And I'm over on LinkedIn too. Just come find me, search my name. It'll be obvious who I am. And I'd love to connect with you there. Again, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate all of the support. And shout out to my amazing Patreon patrons. Y'all are incredible. I adore you and I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for listening. Please share, review, comment, send this to a friend that might need some help as well. And until next time, my friends, stay magical. Bye-bye.